a new bi-weekly show on the Fish Stripes podcast, starring Isaac Azout and Kevin Barral. Fish Stripes Unfiltered starts right now.
Fish Stripes Unfiltered, episode 4. Joined here with a very special guest, Peter Pratt, and we have Ely Sussman along here with us as well. And we have Isaac Azout. Isaac, how are you, my guy? Episode 4.
Can't believe we're already here on episode 4, man. It's been a treat doing this with you guys, and we have a really special guest.
Peter, my man, how are you? From Fish Across the Pond, the podcast. Very great podcast. I suggest you all to watch it. How are you, my guy?
I'm doing awesome. Thanks for having me on, guys. I absolutely love this new pod. I've listened into every episode, been loving it. I've got one first question just to kick things off for you, though, Kevin. Can we have a surname pronunciation the correct way? I've heard Eli's version of the surname. How do we pronounce Barral?
Barral. You have to roll the R.
There we go. Yeah, if you're physically able to roll the R, which I cannot do, but I try my best.
Eli, how
love
are
it.
you, man?
Now that's out of the way, we're going to have a great show, no doubt about it.
Yeah, I'm happy to ride along with this, of course, as I'm always behind the scenes for these unfiltered episodes. But we got Kevin. He's at 80% vocal strength after coming off a band performance. So I'm hanging in here just in case he needs any assistance here. And I'm monitoring some breaking news. We're gonna have some breaking news on this pod too. We'll get to the topics you already had planned out. And then I'm just following along with our man Craig Mish, as usual, as he's finally getting to some of these coaching changes that we were expecting with the organization, and they're just breaking now. But Kevin, let's start off with whatever you had in mind first, and I'm sure we'll work this stuff into the episode.
Yeah, Peter, man. 2021 season, Miami Marlins. I don't think we want to talk about it anymore, but what are your thoughts on that season? Full perspective on that, the ups, the downs, and then we'll get into free agency in a bit.
Maybe we'll have a 2-minute rundown, shall we? That feels about right. If you enjoy pain, this was the team for you. This Marlins team, there was so much pain. It was a long season, a long season, no doubt about it. But there were moments I enjoyed, and there was a lot of downs though. But from the first series for me, I knew the writing was on the wall. I could tell we were in trouble early doors. And, it was disappointing. I had them at 88 wins. 88 wins I went for, so I was bullish. I was probably the most bullish. And honestly, I believe that if the guys were healthy for the majority and they had a shutdown closer, 88 wins was achievable for this team. I'm not talking about after the deadline. I'm talking about the pre-deadline team, healthy, in the main, with a shutdown closer. 88 wins was there this year. The division was there. Wasn't to be. So, disappointing, but listen, we'll be back in 22. It is the biggest offseason since I followed the team. And probably for many people, it's the biggest offseason. It is just ginormous. So, I am hyped. There is going to be a lot of conversation about this offseason, no doubt. We're probably going to be underwhelmed, is my gut feel, though. That's the only worry I have, but it'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, trust me. I had the Marlins in second place in the division. I didn't have an exact record, but I think expectations were high for everyone. And Eli, if you want to jump in here, what were your thoughts on that 2021 season? I know the Fish Stripes live fans have heard it, but not the unfiltered people. So if you want to get into that a little bit.
Yeah, well, I would hope that there was some more intersection between people that are familiar with our other venues and hopped over here and heard my thoughts. I was certainly lower on the team than Peter was, but probably higher than Vegas, than the national consensus. I thought they had the makings of a 75 win team entering the year. That I believe the talent was better than what they had meant actually making the postseason the previous year, just with all the additional complications of a full-length season and a lot of variance, just because they were relying on a lot of young players. There were certain things that I harped on throughout last offseason. In particular, I thought they needed more starting pitching depth. They needed at least one more solid veteran, and they never really made the plunge in that kind of investment to shore up that part of the team. Ultimately, there was some bad luck, both off the field and also in the games themselves. Any way you slice it, this team did play better than their record indicated. They finished with the 6th worst record in baseball. And if you were watching them really throughout the entire season, they're a little bit closer to what they're trying to get to than that record would suggest. They finished themselves in a situation where, I still feel that they're certainly going to improve moving forward without doing much of anything. The question comes how much they should be investing in this upcoming season, and what the overall fan base's expectations are for this team, and what internal expectations are for this organization that believed that they were a lot better entering this year than I thought, and what the national media thought. They have a lot to prove. They made some unusual decisions, and most of them backfired. They did not work out, and that's when people really question your methodology, is when you do unconventional things that don't yield big success. They have a lot to prove to both people inside the organization and outside the organization, and that's why, if nothing else, we're expecting a lot of decisions and changes to be made to all different levels of the organization, knowing that whatever combination they put together this year wasn't quite enough, and they need to do things differently. Ultimately, they're probably just going to have to spend more money to put together a more complete team.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, for the ones watching or listening, you guys heard in episode 1 my thoughts and Isaac's thoughts on that 2021 season. But Isaac, if you have anything else to jump in on and tell the people.
I think Peter mentioned it well. Just right out of the gates, things went south, and I think one of the bigger mistakes that isn't talked about as much, that we haven't really covered on Fish Stripes Live. And remember, they signed Gio Gonzalez in spring training, to just have a veteran arm just in case some injuries happen. Sixto ended up going down, and they ended up needing a bullpen game almost once every turn around the rotation. So I think when Gio Gonzalez decided to retire, they didn't really replace that kind of player. They didn't come back and bring another veteran arm to replace an Anibal Sanchez or someone like that. So I think that was one of the bigger mistakes. But I'm with Peter that if Marte led the league in stolen bases, Duvall was third, second in home runs, RBIs. Aguilar had the year he had. If everyone stays healthy, Jazz doesn't go on the IL so many times. Same with Brian Anderson. That's a team that could compete for a playoff spot, especially with the division wide open the way it was. It really is unfortunate that things happened the way it did. Maybe some shoddy roster construction along the way. But yeah, like you said, it's going to be a big offseason for sure.
Yeah, and going into the offseason, Peter, I mean, it could either be overwhelming for some, maybe the most hyped offseason we've been hearing from since, I guess, 2012 for some people that followed the team at the time. But, I mean, what are your expectations for the Marlins entering the offseason? Not only free agency, but we hear all these trade rumors that are coming down. And what are your thoughts on all of that?
All right, offseason. Pay Miggy. Pay Sandy, pay the dudes that are in the house. Let's put a flag in the ground and say, listen, we're going to pay our studs. That's what I want to see done. Just, let's start there. Free agents. I'm not convinced. It is not in the Marlins' MO to go out and lavishly spend on free agents. Not a chance. So what does that mean? It's going to be trades. It's going to be trade season. All this talk of big money free agents, Castellanos, Correa, no, it's not happening. There's no way. It does not fit the Marlins profile. We're going to be out active in the trade market for a Jose Ramirez, let's say, maybe a Reynolds. I don't know. I mean, these dudes, that's going to be the approach the Marlins take. Probably more like a Reynolds that's a bit of a cheaper dude, but I'd be shocked if they went out and did a standard extravaganza contract. I just can't see that happening. That's what it's going to need to get Correa. He's probably the best dude out there, one of. It's just not happening. So for me, it is all about trade season. Kim is going to be working those phones so hard. But in the meantime, where you haven't got to go and pay that crazy money, sign up Sandy, sign up Miggy, get them locked in, and then go and do your work. That's how I see it playing out.
Yeah, Eli, pretty much the same question I asked Peter. I mean, what are your expectations heading into that offseason?
Similar to Peter. I want to imagine that they'll just be very creative. There are so few roles on this team that are totally ironed down that you feel totally confident in moving forward. Of course, that Sandy is going to be part of this rotation. That Miggy is going to be part of this infield. I think almost everything else is fluid. If you want to explore all options to put together the best possible team on whatever budget they have to put together that team, then you get creative. That's it. That's why the universe of players that they could pursue is almost unlimited. It's hundreds of options, and I guess most of those via trade, but also I'm sure they'll do some business via free agency, just knowing that there's some limitations in terms of their farm system. It's a good farm system. I've spent a lot of time, diving into it on a player-by-player basis, and it's one that has, as we know, just incredible pitching depth, probably as much as any other organization in baseball. In terms of guys on the very top end of that farm system that you truly believe are destined for stardom, that you can feel are locks for stardom, I don't really see that. And that's, do they have that kind of headliner player that you can use to acquire a Jose Ramirez or imagine just any of the very best trade candidates out there, because that's sometimes what it takes to get these deals done, is having a player that is major league ready and seemingly checks all the boxes you want from an all-star. And with this organization, even though there are plenty of players that have that ceiling, one thing they've done in building this organization is also picking up a lot of players that have risk, hitters that strike out too much, pitchers that don't have the best track record of durability. And I think because of that, there will need to be some sort of significant free agent investment. And I mean, they can go in a bunch of different directions. Most likely it's going to be on the outfield side, that outfielder that they want, that is an above average run producer and that is still in the prime of their career, whether that's Castellanos, whether that's Chris Taylor, a couple others that are kind of in that same tier. I feel like one of those players should be someone that they really focus on and feel they can get without actually depleting any of the young talent that they want to help those guys, put it all together.
Yeah, Isaac, I mean, we look at pretty much the narrative the Marlins have gone with, which is sign guys like veterans. And, we could give examples. Brandon Kinsler, that one season, very cheap contract. I think it was like a minor league contract. I mean, I think we could see the Marlins do some of that, right?
Yeah, I mean, like Peter said, they're not going to go out and do that 2012 offseason signing barrage, unfortunately, where they signed Reyes and Burley and Bell. I think one of those guys that Eli mentioned, whether it's Chris Taylor, which I see really realistic, especially with this postseason he's having, I think the Marlins are watching carefully. I think Miguel Rojas was asked about him before, and Kim Ng, has some familiarity with that organization. So I think that's a realistic option. I think they're going to sign one big time free agent where they're making more than $10 million annually. And unfortunately, because they've sort of so far whiffed on some of these draft picks, some of these trades, they are going to have to deplete the farm system a bit, which is unfortunate because you never want to do that. But we're in the situation where it's year 5. We have no more time to wait. So they are going to have to trade some guys. We're going to have to trade some guys that no one's going to want to get rid of. But it is going to be trade season for sure. I know that Brian Reynolds is going to be someone that they look at a lot. And I think another name that I would look at, even if it's just as a rental, would be that Wilson Contreras guy. Mm-hmm. I think that would just add so much value to this team, both defensively, working with the staff, and he's one of the best offensive catchers in all of baseball. So they're going to have a lot of work to do this offseason. Absolutely.
Yeah, I've heard that Wilson Contreras guy's pretty good. I mean, I think there's not much more to say on that. But, yeah, trade season, I think that's what we've been hearing the most. We haven't even been hearing much of free agency besides Castellanos, which the Marlins are going to do their due diligence. They're going to put in a bid on the guy. But at the end of the day, teams like possibly even the Reds are going to outbid the Marlins quickly. And I know we've been talking about Pay Marte, that they're probably going to do their due diligence call as well. We've mentioned this before, but Miami's going to do those low-key type of signings. I think they're going to sign guys and bullpen players, and I think that's what they'll do mainly in free agency. They'll go bullpen and free agency and then assess, center field, the outfield, the position players mainly through trades. And I've always said Andrew Chaffin's a great option. And I don't know if Eli's brought him in the podcast he has every Wednesday, the shopping one with the free agents. But yeah, going into actual offseason news that we already have, we have Miggy Rowe. He on the Chris Rose rotation announced him and the Marlins were nearing an extension. I don't know if you have the clip of that, Eli, if you could put it up for us, but it should be somewhere there. And
yeah, let me press this so that people can listen.
We're talking. I'm happy. I'm happy that they approached me the same way that I was thinking early in the year in spring training, and then during the year, I always wanted to be here in Miami. and I want to continue to be here and be part of this organization when we actually take that step towards the part that we want to be, which is a winning team, winning franchise. So I've been here for the up and downs, a lot of downs, but I want to be here for the ups too. So
great.
We're getting really close, and I'm happy to share that with you guys.
Yeah, Peter, what are your thoughts on Miggy Rowe, the captain, the unofficial captain, returning to the Marlins, the longest tenured Marlin right now, and I think he will be long tenured for a long time to come.
Looks like it. I'm intrigued to see the way they go with this one, but for me, sign Miggy, no brainer. I think the way the contract worked, it was quite an undervalued vesting option kind of deal. So I think they're kind of, paying Miggy for what he's done in some ways. Like the Marlins could just kind of keep this 1 year, undervalued deal. I think they're going to do right by Miggy and pay him. He does so much for the organization off the field. He's massive. So for me, it's to lock him up for, let's say it's 2 years, maybe with a third option, maybe whatever that looks like. I'm all good for that. I think that's a sensible approach. The question we've got to think about now with Miggy is what his role becomes. I think that becomes the key question into next year and at the back end of next year and into the year after that, because this team lacks offense. That's the problem, right? It's a bottom 5 offense, and that included having Duvall on the team for most of the year and Marte, and it was still bottom 5. So at some point, Miggy's role will need to change, and there'll need to be some more offensive production from that spot. There has to be. And so lock Miggy up. He's so valuable. However, we need to keep layering in the talent too on top of that. The offensive production too from that spot. It needs to be more. Others around the league have got so much pop from the shortstop position. And the Marlins Miggy is what he is. He's overperformed in many ways as a player the last few years, but we still need more. And Miggy then needs to become more of a role player dude, which I think he's fully bought into. So I think it'd be a great start. El Capitan, lock him up, no doubt.
Isaac, what are your thoughts on this extension?
Yeah, we spoke about it on live. I think it was last night or 2 nights ago. I couldn't agree more, Peter, because I think if this team is going to take the next level, and I don't think you can do that with someone like Miguel Rojas as a starting shortstop, not to sound like, a jerk, but he is so valuable in so many different ways. If he's starting for you 3 to 4 times a week, and if he's coming off the bench, he's one of the best bench bats, I would think, in all of Major League Baseball. If you can come off the bench and supply a good at-bat, which is what he's capable of doing, then so be it. But yeah, look, there are 20 shortstops in Major League Baseball that are probably better than Miguel Rojas offensively. And so you're not going to compete with the guys like Dansby Swanson and when you have Corey Seager and other guys like that. So I know it's probably unlikely, but I would look at one of the top 5 shortstops that are becoming free agents this year. It's not going to happen. It's going to be a lot of money, but you need a star shortstop. Maybe Jeter just loves Rojas, and that's going to be the case. But, yeah, no, I love that he's here for the next couple of years again. But I do hope the role changes eventually. Maybe if it's not this year, it's next year in 23. But I do think that he really could extend his career even more by being sort of that super utility guy.
Yeah, he's 33 if I'm correct. So I mean,
he'll be 33 entering next year, and that turns out to be his career home run total, 33 home runs. And just like to put that in your minds, I mean, a lot of these guys that are now available in free agency this year, these shortstops that we look to as the stars, they hit 33 home runs in a single year if they're healthy. Easily. I mean, that just shows like the contrast in upside between him and other guys. This is something I've mentioned before, is that in terms of his value as an offensive player, he's incredible against left-handed pitching. It's hard to even compare, even though he has limitations in other parts of his game. In particular, when you put him in that platoon advantage the past couple of years, both 2020 and he continued it into 2021, he's amazing. And that ensures that he's a guy that you want on the field several times a week, whether that's at shortstop or at any of the other infield positions, because he has experience playing all those other infield positions. There's no doubt he has a substantial role on a contending team, and that's why other teams wanted him at this past trade deadline to plug him into whatever they had going, because he is that great blend of ability, but also the lack of an ego as somebody that came from very humble roots. He's somebody that I think can be realistic about where he is on his career arc. That eventually there will come a time where he transitions to a slightly different role, and I think he's ready for it. And what's important is that the team recognizes the value that he's already provided and what he'll continue to do in terms of that new deal, which, I mean, my speculation would be, if you look at some comparable deals, Colton Wong, when he was a free agent, he was another great defender, limited power, up the middle player. He got 2 years, $18 million from the Brewers. Jonathan Scope was a pending free agent when he extended with the Tigers. He got 2 years, $15 million. I think that's the kind of range that you're looking at. If he gets those 2 additional years, he'd be getting a nice little pay bump, but something that certainly still leaves the team with a ton of flexibility to make impact moves around him.
Yeah, and this makes so much sense. And it just starts the trend of let's start locking up guys, because you lock up Miggy, hopefully Sandy's next, and whoever comes next after Sandy, because it just makes sense. These guys have done their due diligence with this team. They've been through the bottoms. They've been through the good. Miggy said it on the Rose rotation. I mean, you got to lock up the guy. He deserves it. He's the captain. He's been with the team for 8 years almost now. So just lock up the guy. It makes all the sense. And speaking of Miggy, I was going to put this towards the bottom of the pod, but I think it makes sense to put it now. You have the clip for this, Eli. He talked about Miami spending money. I don't know if you have that clip, if you could play it for us there quickly.
No, I don't have a whole lot of other video loaded up in here at this very moment. I'll probably plug it in post-editing for the podcast listeners to enjoy. A lot of people probably watching this on YouTube. Everybody else, go ahead and check out our podcast, available on all the podcast platforms, and we'll dress up that clip in there. But just, to go what you said, I think that's one reason why he still feels really confident about this organization, because they're pretty transparent about their plans, and they told him how probably unsatisfied they were with how this season went, and understand that they are ready to spend to some degree. Again, that's the big question about. I mean, it's obvious that they will carry a larger payroll in 2022 than they did in 2021. But there's a big difference between spending more and also spending competitively with other teams in their division. Especially in this division, they have just extraordinary resources on almost all these other teams in the division. And the Marlins historically have not played in that same ballpark as those guys. They have to do it a little bit smarter in order to keep pace with them.
Yeah, and I'm going to start here with Peter. I mean, what are your thoughts on what Miggy said there with he assumes that the Marlins are going to go all in and, spend that cash that they have?
I guess the question is how big is that bag of cash? And I'm not sure we're talking a 200 million roster, let's say. The one thing, just to kind of go back to recent deals and guys, recently in the last, let's say, year and a half, 2 years, I think the Marlins have been really good at from free agents and guys they picked up. They've been good. They've hit on a lot of guys like Duvall. They hit on him. Marte they traded for. He then went on to have a career year. Like the Marlins, actually, their eye is good at the moment. So that is really encouraging, the way they're kind of, working in this a tier below, right? And they're but they are hitting on guys. And then, maybe what they did at the deadline with Duvall was below par. I think that's fair. I don't know what happened. That was a botch in some sort of way. But I still think the Marte return was good after the kind of contract stuff ended and, whatever. But what are they going to do this offseason? What do I think about Miggy's words? Listen, Miggy wants to win. He's been there. The pitching's ready. He's calling it out. And it is. The starting pitching is there in depth. I look at thinking about Miggy in his role, him becoming effectively a John Birdie for next year, and then you layer in someone else new. Like that's what needs to happen. The Marlins need to add loads more depth in here. And, you then look at it and go, right, okay, Miggy Rowe is now the John Birdie role. Okay, that's an upgrade. Okay, cool. Who's playing shortstop? Don't know. Let's see who that is. And they just need offensive production. The problem I've got is we had Marte at center field, Duvall in right field, Dickerson in left. But either way, those two dudes were there for half a year, and we're going to struggle to find that production from last year. Like two of the most productive guys in the entire MLB, and we still absolutely shit the bed. So that's the concerning part, is to get to that level of production, we're going to have to really hit on some guys. And I'm not sure those guys actually had career years in many ways. So it's really tough. Like, this is the real worry for me, that who are we going to get, and are they even going to get us to that level? I don't know. As Eli said, I think the really interesting part is just the amount of directions they can go. Like, the opportunities are limitless. They truly are, because they've got so many arms that everyone will cover. And they'll be creative. I think Eli's really hit on that's going to be the way they go. Off-season spending, I'm just not convinced. I just can't see it. I can see a few more Duvall's, 2-year deals, that type of thing. I don't know. I'd be shocked if they went anything like crazy.
Yeah, and you talk about players that they've hit on. I mean, Brad Boxberg is a guy. You also have Brandon Kinsler, who they hit on, just that 2020 pandemic season. And I know Isaac was talking, they're muted. So, I mean, anything you have to add there?
With what Peter said, that a few more Duvall type signings, I think Adam Duvall would be great to come back. You know, I talked about it with Christina De Nicola. She was like, no, I don't want him back. But I think he makes all the sense in the world to come back, play good defense in the outfield. And if he's your free agent signing, he's going to give you at least 30 home runs. Then you go make a trade for that star outfielder, quote unquote. You make a trade for a catcher, because I agree with you, man. They're not going to spend more than that. Was 40 million. I think they have 40 million they're going to spend on Sandy, something like that, and the 40 million that they saved from Marte, use that towards maybe Duvall and a relief pitcher, and then from there on it's going to be all trades. So I really like Duvall to come back. I think he's a really, really valued guy in the clubhouse, and he's a really valued guy on the field as well.
Yep, and Eli at the start of the podcast had, pretty much told us that there was some breaking news, and I'm going to let Eli take over this part of the podcast, but, go ahead.
From our buddy Craig Mish, we were anticipating this. I've mentioned before that October, there's not much player movement in October, but we see coaching carousel move round and round and round. And so finally, Craig Mish reporting that Trey Hillman, the Marlins third base coach, and their infield instructor, he does both duties. So we'll get into that. He's leaving the organization to pursue other opportunities. And along that same vein, the assistant hitting coach, Robert Rodríguez, doing the same, pursuing other opportunities. So those are the first two dominoes to fall on the coaching staff. I wonder if that's a complete list. I mean, Mish says that he'll need to wait until next week to confirm who's actually coming back. So it is possible that there are a couple others still in limbo in terms of trying to renew their contracts. Yeah. So, I mean, with Hillman, it's important to note that he had those dual responsibilities at third base and as the infield coach. At third base, there are a few moments where that job becomes under the microscope when you send somebody and you shouldn't have sent him to score, and vice versa. But generally speaking, I think his bigger impact was as an infield coach. And I guess, Peter, I'd be interested in hearing what you thought about that, because it was complicated. At times this year, I felt they did a really good job at positioning guys in the right spot to make plays on the infield. At the same time, I mean, the most frustrating thing about this team perhaps was defensively how many routine errors they made. Jazz being kind of the main culprit of that, but also, to varying extents, a lot of those guys around the infield making a lot of routine errors. So ultimately, I think a lot of the responsibility falls to the players, but this is the type of change you see when one particular part of your team is underperforming. You try to get a new voice in there, I guess.
I think it makes sense. I think what immediately when I think of the infield in 2021, I just look at Jazz and just that's what I remember. That's what I remember, that there were just too many errors. There's a lot of splashy plays from Jazz, like the talent's there clearly, but a lot of errors from him, and it's kind of concerning with him. I think I'm not convinced. I just don't quite see the shortstop in him in the future. Like when I look at Miggy right now and what Miggy does at shortstop, like for me, they're night and day. Like the arm in particular, like Miggy's arm is just sensational. And I'm not shocked. I mean, listen, the Marlins base running was a major problem, right? The whole base running, the whole picked off at first and wherever was just a shambles. So base running was a problem. A lot of infield errors. However, I would say on the infield side, Brian Anderson is an elite third baseman and has become an elite third baseman in his time with the Marlins. Miggy, for me, an absolute stud third baseman, a stud arm. I mean, that Braxton Garrett clip will live long in the memory. That play, last year. It was I've never seen anything like it. Bounced off the third base. Brian Anderson snagged it. Zinged it into first base. Brack's just going, what the hell's happened? Thanks for that, BA. But listen, BA has kicked on. Miggy's kicked on. I'm concerned about Jazz. Aguilar is a stunning first baseman, in my opinion. Lewin's even better than him. So there's tons of talent around there. Jazz is the one for me. Base running's a problem. And I'm not surprised to see hitting coaches starting to go as well. I mean, listen, the hitting side was an absolute disaster. I think there'll be more, to be honest, on the hitting side that'll come in the next week or two, whatever Craig kind of puts the timeline on. But listen, it's a bad team. It was a bad team. And I think Craig talked about in his own pod that changes have to be made. You can't just roll out the same dudes and expect the same, different results. People have got to go. Donnie's back, so others are going to have to go.
Yeah, Isaac. I mean, I think we talked about this on the first episode of Fish Stripes Live in the off season. Is this This is something that we expected? What do you say?
Well, I mean, if you say, I didn't expect the shitty fielding from Jazz as much. I think he came up as a really good defensive shortstop who was gonna possibly win Gold Gloves. I didn't see that coming. I thought he was a hell of a second baseman, what he showed in spring training, because I was there for most of the games and he was fantastic. Now with the firings, of course, I mean, you don't lose 97, however many games they lost, and roll back out 50% of the coaching staff. I think the manager coming back, okay, Don Mattingly is going to be great. I don't know if James Rowson is going to come back. I think he's really highly regarded all over the place. So I'm sure he's going to have managerial opportunities possibly. And he really was like the hitting coordinator, the offensive coordinator on the baseball team. So I don't know if he'll be back. But yeah, you can't be surprised when a lot of the coaching staff's going to go, and there should be a lot of turnover with the player roster as well.
Yeah, I mean, I've just seen that shitty base running in this past season. I mean, it made sense to get rid of Trey Hillman. Jazz was not good defensively, especially when Miggy was out and he had to take over shortstop, which was his main position, when he first came up in the minors at the time. He just wasn't good. I prefer him a lot more at second base. That's where he's been playing a lot better. Even though he has his struggles, he made some very nice plays. The one in New York where he covered a lot of ground to go grab that pop fly. I mean, there are many more we could talk about, but yeah, this is something I think we expected it to happen. And Isaac, I'm going to let you take over here for the fall development camp, which you went to, I'm pretty sure yesterday it was, or 2 days ago.
Yeah, so the media is allowed to go once a week, and it's an interesting dynamic. They only invited offensive players. I think part of that was due to COVID. They didn't want to have so many people at Lone Depot Park, so there's no pitchers, which made me curious as to where are guys like Max Meyer and Dax Fulton and all these pitchers? Where are they? What are they doing? But some names that stood out to me. One of them, my favorite guy, is Cody Morrison. He came in the draft this year. He's a guy that just has a spectacular swing. He showed a little bit of pop. He didn't show that much in his first, 33 professional games, but he looked really good. Griffin Conine, I don't know, man. When you strike out against a pitching machine, when it's only throwing fastballs, that's a bit of a red flag, in my opinion. But the guy is Superman looking. He is jacked. He looks like he can bench 350 pounds. So he's got the looks. He's got the body, but let's see if he can hit. And some other names, Jose Salas, man. That kid he's going to be a stud. If I had to pick one guy to be untouchable in the Marlins farm system, it'd be Jose Salas. That kid is young. He's mature. I had a media session with him last week. He has his head on right, and he hits the ball with power. The ball just sounds different off his bat, and he's still so young. And he has so much to grow into. So he's definitely a name to look into, to keep an eye on for sure. And yeah, then when I was there 2 days ago, it was off-speed pitches, so there's a few more strikeouts, but it was overall a really good camp, and I think it ended today. So we'll be back for, I think, Thanksgiving. There'll be some sort of turkey drive or something.
Peter, I mean, if you want to jump in on this, I mean, he talked about Salas. What are your thoughts on him, man? He's been one of the bigger names we've been speaking of in the Brian Reynolds trade because of how much young prospects Pittsburgh will want, especially with
Isaac said he's untouchable. He's untouchable.
Isaac, just a couple weeks ago, we were talking about it, and he said, "Whoa, we'd have to include Salas." Now, after this game stuff, he's saying he's untouchable. So
I'm not saying I would. I'm saying you would have to, but I wouldn't. But if they want,
none of us would, to be honest. But you have to, yeah. Peter, I mean, if you want to jump in on this one,
it's fair to say that I'm definitely not the best person to give opinion on low-level minor league dudes for sure. It's definitely not my expertise. But what I've heard and what I've kind of read on the guys I follow, like Isaac, that there's a lot of love for Salas and belief that he has the potential to be the star in that of all the system there, perhaps. So it's, I think when we're looking for offensive dudes, if we're going to trade away some depth there seems to be a ton of outfielders. There's a ton of outfield depth knocking around too. Obviously, Jesus has obviously made it up to the bigs. De La Cruz is up there now. So like a Conine, a Burdick, whatever, you start to think, Encarnacion maybe. Are these the types of dudes that maybe you kind of look to include into trades? Maybe. But it's so hard. It's so hard because, listen, there's so many sharp teams around now, right? They'll know it. They'll know Salas is a stud. They watch this. They watch these streams. They listen to the pod. They'll know. They'll know he's a stud. So, yeah, it's great to see. What Isaac said there just absolutely killed me, though, on Conine getting struck out by the machine. That is, he's got K issues. And like you said, it's a red flag for me. A few red flags, I'll say, if I'm on Twitter. Of Conine getting struck out by the machine. That is not good on just fastballs. So, but listen, it's good. It's good to see from a Marlins perspective. I think there's tons of dudes there. Going back to, I think, what Eli said, though, for me, we don't have a crown jewel right now, in my opinion. I think that is probably fair. There is no real crown jewel that other teams will covet that becomes like a difference deal maker in a big time trade. I think that is probably the problem we face on the hitting side, particularly.
Yeah, the two guys in the system that I think could be there at this time next year would be Khalil Watson, who was at this camp as well. In my opinion, I'd probably give Watson the slight edge in terms of the best player that was at this fall development camp, and also Yuri Perez, the humongous right-handed pitcher. So both those guys are still 18 years old, and they don't have a whole lot of minor league experience yet. Especially Khalil Watson. At this time next year, if they grow into their bodies a little more and they continue to perform against much older competition, show like well-rounded skill sets that both of them are, seem to have right now, but still need more evidence to prove it, then you're talking about guys that would be elite prospects. And then you make an interesting decision about, wow, are these guys actually close to being major league ready as like 19-year-olds, or are they the ones you put in one of these kind of deals to get immediate help? The problem is, of course, that we know that there's urgency to make some moves this offseason, and that's why they're in a very nebulous space. I don't feel they're totally untouchable, but really for nothing less than like the true premium players that we already talked about earlier in the pod, which so in my mind, I would expect them to kind of be off limits in this offseason just because they do have that potential to like take another step forward once they get to the 2022 minor league season. Just going back to what Isaac mentioned about, the uncertainty about how the Marlins are handling their young pitchers right now. It just seems most of them are kind of on the couch, or maybe not on the couch. Hopefully they're doing something more fulfilling. Hopefully they're traveling the world, living it up, having fun, but they're not throwing. They're not using their throwing arms. And that seems to be an intentional choice. Historically, this is the time of year where you have what's called instructs. You have an instructional camp with both hitters and position players. And what seems the Marlins did is they just cut it in half. They did this development camp is sort of what you would normally be doing this time of year at instructional camp, except they did it without having any pitchers there. So I'll be curious to get some answers on that, whether it's from Kim Eng or from her lieutenants right below. We're trying to just explain the thought process behind it, because I don't think any of us are totally sure about what they're doing there, other than the fact that they must feel really confident in these pitchers and they don't want to screw it up. So if those guys aren't throwing, if they don't have an opportunity to get hurt, then their stock can't go down, presumably. That might be part of the thinking, is just being very cautious about those guys.
Yeah, I thought it was really peculiar that they didn't, it didn't have to be Max Meyer, but they could have found any guys that just simply throw just to face some live pitching. Because the thing with the pitching machine, I've faced pitching machines. To get the timing right, you're seeing the coach put the ball and you don't know when you need to face a pitcher. And especially when the first 2 weeks was fastballs only, maybe that's why the team can't develop hitters, because they're facing fastballs only from a machine as professionals. I don't see what good can come out of that. And then the thing you guys mentioned was a great point, that they just lack that jewel prospect. Like the Nationals had Soto, the Braves had Acuna, the Nationals also had Robles, the Robles sort of didn't really pan out as well. and Mariners have Kelnick, guys like that. The Marlins don't have a top 10 major league prospect like that. So like you said, I think Uri, I can't believe he's still 18, man. The success he's had at low A, high A a little bit, I cannot believe he's still 18. I thought he was 19, 20. Khalil Watson, Jose Salas, you're right. Those guys, if they perform even half as well as they did this year in 2022, I think they catapult into top 50 consideration in the MLB pipeline list.
I think the most like shocking thing though for me is just JJ Bleday. Like from where he was in spring training, if we think back to spring and JJ was lighting up spring, I was thinking we're going to see Bleday at the major league level this year, the way spring was going.
Yes.
And it's just completely fallen off for him. I'm not close enough to, see it and understand, but that for me is the real head scratcher and is a real red flag again from an organizational perspective that it seems to have really gone backwards fast with him. So big year for him in 22 as well.
Yeah, no, and I'm with you on there with Bleday. I was shocked, and also I'm a little down on him for sure. I think he's maybe the 10th best prospect in the organization. What it gives me some hope is that in his first 2 years at Vanderbilt, he didn't have much of the power. So what I'm thinking is he was always like a pure hitter, which is why he was playing as a freshman and sophomore. He was a pure hitter guy first, and then the power all of a sudden came in his junior year, and that's when he led the NCAA with home runs. So maybe just got in his head right now saying, okay, I'm this guy that hits home runs now. He just stepped away from just that hitter first profile a little bit in his professional season so far. Maybe that's something to do with it. I don't know, but he's doing a lot of different batting stances, a lot of different swings, it looks like. So there's going to be a huge 2022 season for JJ.
Yeah, and when it comes to Bleday, and, not even just Bleday, but Connor Scott, guys have been disappointing, mainly more Bleday, but you start to give up on these guys. And I'm not saying I'm giving up on Bleday, not even close. No one should be giving up on Bleday, but Connor Scott, I mean, let's talk. He was at the camp, I'm pretty sure, or he's at AFL. Yeah. But he's been a guy who's been disappointing. I mean, you would expect the guy who already was drafted in 2018, he would be at least in AA or moving on to AAA. But the guy's in Beloit, most likely going to AA next year. But what are your thoughts on a guy like Connor Scott? I mean, I'm someone who's almost given up on him. I'm going to give him a little bit more time, but it's getting to the point where if he's the guy who factors in a trade, let's say, Chicago for Wilson Contreras, if he's the guy you have to throw in, I would throw him in, and I'm getting Wilson Contreras on that one-year deal, if it's a rental or not. Or even in the Brian Reynolds trade, if you have to throw him in there. And I want to start here with Isaac, because I know you've been in that development camp.
I think both those teams are smart enough to not, have Connor Scott as the –
No, yeah, but I'm just saying.
No, yeah, of course. But honestly, for a Wilson Contreras trade, maybe. But – yeah, no, I've been disappointed with Connor Scott. I followed him a little bit when he was at Plant High School in Tampa. And I was very surprised when the Marlins chose him with Tristan Casas still on the board. That just bothers me. I know that was just straight Gary Denbo decision from my understandings. Yeah. But yeah, the swing did clean up a little bit. There is still a lot going on with that hitch in that left-handed swing. A lot going on there still. The power, it's mediocre at best. He didn't hit one out. I don't think he reached the warning track in the games that I saw him play. He played in all three simulated games that I saw. But yeah, he's someone that you have to start, looking at the clock and saying, okay, this is 2022. You're drafted in 2018. You should at least be in the high levels of the minors now, but he's not. So it's definitely it's worrisome for sure.
Yeah, Peter. I mean, we look at Connor Scott. Pretty disappointing, I would say.
I think that's a fair assessment. I mean, first round pick, right, from 2018, so we're 3 years on, and again, the progression just hasn't been there. So, listen, any first round pick that really underwhelms, it's never going to be a great look. So, you got to hit on these guys. I was thinking about the Braves the other day, kind of looking at their success and where they are now, and listen, they just hit on the core. You got to hit on the core. You have to. And the Braves' payroll is, I don't know, 120 million. And they've got a couple of real nice team-friendly deals, of course, but they're not at that kind of Phillies level, the kind of right against the luxury tax kind of threshold. The Braves are actually probably the next to the Marlins, probably the next spenders in the NL East anyway, so in terms of lowest. So for me, the Marlins, they have to hit on these dudes. Bleday has to become good. He has to make it, and these guys have to if the Marlins are really, truly going to be competitive for a long time. And it's concerning that these first-round picks, the hitters, just don't seem to be on the right path right now. And I don't know what the reason is. Again, I'm not the best person to give kind of any opinion on that, but it's concerning. I think is kind of probably what we're all feeling with this one with the offensive dudes.
Yeah, Eli. I mean, what are your thoughts on Connor Scott? I know, at least I'm almost giving up on him, but we know, our good buddy Alex Carver never gives up on his guys until they are at the Isan Diaz level of the major leagues. But
still on Victor.
What are your thoughts on Scott?
Oh, I mean, this is your show, and I guess you decided to bully Connor Scott for some reason. I don't know why. I don't think he's like emblematic of everything that's gone wrong with this organization. I bundle him with the rest of the top of that draft class in 2018. Remember where they are? They just traded away most of their old core, and very intentionally, they used each of those top 4 picks in the draft on guys they thought could be impact hitters up the middle of the field. It was Connor Scott. Then right after him, it was Osiris Johnson. Then it was Will Banfield. And then it was Tristan Pompey. And our group chat was popping up a little bit about Tristan Pompey, who left a very distasteful comment on Instagram about sarcastically pointing out that it would be nice to be part of a winning organization, when in fact he probably more so than anybody else at the top of that draft, he's the guy that has been a total bust. They thought Tristan Pompey, he was the first college guy of that group, after 3 years, if you're coming out of college in a big program and you're productive in your first year in the minors, every expectation is that he would be a factor in their outfield right now. He was supposed to be like Brian De La Cruz. He was supposed to be that kind of role player or like plugged into that scenario. And he wasn't even a consideration, because ever since 2019, he's done absolutely nothing on the field to grow into himself. And I think a lot of us wonder if he'll even be part of the organization 6 months from now when the new minor league season gets going. But all those guys on top of in that most of their draft money that year went to those hitters at the top of the group. I'm more optimistic, I guess, on Connor Scott than you guys might be. He played really well down the stretch of this minor league season, and he did hit from more power. And as underwhelming as he looks right now, he has actually bulked up from where he was when they drafted him. I don't know exactly how that plays in the majors, but I still have some confidence that he'll eventually make it to the majors. It's more of a question with someone like Will Banfield, who's in the fall league right now, and he hasn't been able to hit a lick, even though he's really advanced defensively. And then Osiris Johnson's in a very interesting spot where he was very young for that draft class. He just turned 21 right now, but he has now undergone a position change from the infield to the outfield, and the hitting results aren't what you expect them to be. But just from watching him, he still has a really exciting swing path, and the measurables on his swing are still impressive. That if he gets more time, I think he could regroup and still like turn into a factor. Overall, that first draft class, that was their first opportunity to get new talent to like put their mark on the future of this organization. And so far in that draft class, the one guy that has made the majors has been Alex Vesia, and he's been effective in the majors, but not for them because they traded him to the Dodgers. We talked about this on the live stream. We're not going to rehash that.
Yeah.
But the fact that it's now been long enough to really start making some judgments on that draft class. And so far, the evaluation has to be pretty critical that they did not come away with much, even though there's still time for a few of those guys to kind of right the ship and make an impact.
Yeah, we're not even going to get into Alex Vesia. Group chat's been popping off, I think, for a solid 3 days on that. And, you guys also discussed it on the live stream. I want to get into Brian De La Cruz. We mentioned him, I think, twice already. And there was a tweet today by Toros del Este, which said Brian De La Cruz at house. I mean, does this mean he's playing winter league ball, or what are your thoughts on this, Isaac?
Like Eli said, I don't think he's playing. I don't know. I'm not informed enough to tell you guys. But I mean, it wouldn't be the worst idea in the world. Just get some more reps. Offensively, there's nothing bad that can come from more reps. So yeah, it's a great photo of our LeBron-looking center fielder. But yeah, no, he seems to just enjoying the off season. Not much else to it.
Yeah, Peter, what are your thoughts on this? Or Eli? We could go to Eli first.
Well, winter ball is like my forte. This is the stuff I dive into a lot, and my expectation is that he'll play minimally, if not at all. I don't think you're going to see him play much at all, just given the situation he's in. A lot of the guys that do play winter ball, they're either minor leaguers or they are perhaps veterans that are very fringy in their organizations, that are kind of hanging on to their last thread as potential big leaguers. And he's someone that's in a very comfortable position. The way that he played during his first half season, looking like every bit of a starting caliber outfielder. I mean, there's not much that he can prove in winter ball that will better help his career moving forward. He has played winter ball in the past with this team. And I think today, in addition to this photo, he took like some batting practice, but not in a full uniform, just in like this t-shirt. It's also their season starts in 5 days. So it's a little unusual that he'd just be showing up to camp right now and have enough time to be a prominent member of their lineup. This is something, though, that we follow pretty closely. I mean, all the guys that are either Marlins major leaguers or prospects that do winter ball, we keep track with them. I try to get some highlights of them. So if he does play, I'll get some highlights. As a guy that was healthy this year at both AAA and the majors, and like I said, is in a really comfortable position entering next year, being on the Marlins 40-man roster. I don't see what the benefit would be. And really the downside is if he gets hurt. That's the only thing that could derail him in a significant way, is if he gets hurt playing in the offseason. I think this is more as it's like a victory lap now that he made it to the majors after coming from this group. I think he's still pretty close with the guys on the team, not necessarily too worried about playing a big workload over the winter.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but is Peter O'Brien on this team?
Yeah, Peter O'Brien. I lose track now. I think it's at least 3 years now that he's been on this team. He won MVP of the entire league a couple of years ago. And then they won the league championship that year. He came back last winter and was not quite as effective. So Peter O'Brien, people, hopefully some of you guys remember him on the major league team in 2018 and briefly in 2019. He hasn't done a whole lot since in the US, but he's still making a living internationally, both in the DR and even in Mexico. So he's still a great teammate, fully bilingual guy. And he's having a good time this winter too.
Peter, your thoughts on De La Cruz possibly playing in the DR?
I look at this picture. This sums up De La Cruz for me. He loves life. He loves fun. Like, he's just enjoying himself. He's going back there like, hey guys, I just want to have fun and support the team. I think maybe Eli hit it there with just a victory lap. Like, he's become a major league player since the last time around, and he had a great second half. We can't deny it. He's just enjoying himself. So absolutely no problem with this. I remember just thinking back to I think it was last year, Lewin Diaz absolutely went bananas in I think it was this same league as well.
Yes.
So
yes.
Every other day there'd be a highlight of Lewin hitting bombs or hitting stuff, and I was like, okay, cool. It's going to be Lewin's year. So listen, De La Cruz being out there, he can do what he wants. He's having fun, as long as he doesn't get hurt. If he gets hurt, then that is another shit show the Marlins will have to deal with, I think.
Yeah. Right before we get into the hefty mailbag that we have, your thoughts on the playoffs, Pete. I mean, it's been crazy. I would say that for sure, with the Braves possibly not blowing another 3-1 lead to the same team, to seeing the cheaters on the other side playing Boston against Houston.
Yeah, so I've got to hold my hands up. I haven't watched a lot of it live and in full. I'm a Marlins fan, right? I'm not so much of a baseball fan, which is shocking, right? I've put myself through bullpen games galore with the Marlins, and I'll watch the whole thing. And I'm not watching the NLDS and NLCS and whatever. So there's something wrong with me there, I guess. But in general, the bits I have watched, the AL offensively is just wild, is what I'd say. Like, it is just bombs away in the AL. The NL is definitely a different league, and it's but like you said, I would love the Dodgers to take down the Braves now after getting a 3-1 lead. And they're lined up pitching wise. Mad Max is ready to rock and roll, and Bueller maybe game 7. So listen, the Braves are going to be at home. They'll be confident of nicking one of them 2 games. I'm sure but they'll be nervous too, no doubt. I think the Astros will also feel confident. I think they do have a little bit more pitching in the tank, but there hasn't been much pitching at all in the AL. So I feel confident the Astros are going to be there. I hope the Dodgers. I hope it's an Astros. Do I hope it's an Astros? I'm not sure if that's the right way of saying it, but I think it'll be Astros, maybe Dodgers. I hope it's the Dodgers, if that makes sense.
Yeah, Eli, what are your thoughts on these playoffs? And I think one of the biggest names has been KK Hernandez, which has been dominating this series, especially the ALCS, and walked it off technically in the ALDS.
He's come back down to earth a little bit since the best moments he had during this postseason. Still really great overall for him, and he's been fortunate because he was with the Dodgers all those years before coming over to Boston. So he's been in the middle of deep postseason runs, one after the other after the other. I guess I'm in an unpopular stance by Marlins fans because I'd like to see the Braves get a shot at the World Series, not necessarily win it, but at least break through, because they haven't even been to one in over 20 years. Whereas all these other teams, the Red Sox just won it in 2018. The Astros won it in 2017. The Dodgers won it last year. It'd be nice to see some new blood at least get knocking on the door to get there. And so with the Braves, I guess my ideal outcome is that they make it to the World Series, but then lose in devastating fashion, but at least make it one step further than they have, like I said, in a couple decades. They have been they have so many of these failures, and it's such a strange contrast from the Marlins fan experience because they're seemingly always in the mix, but it's been so long since they actually broke through and had anything to truly brag about. So even while it seems from the outside that they have a lot to be grateful for, going so long without a ring, having some adult fans who have no memory of winning World Series with the Braves organization, I want to see them, figure this out at least this 1 year and get one step further than usual.
Isaac, we did talk during the ALDS and NLDS. What are your thoughts on these championship series?
Just the playoffs as a whole has just been so entertaining to watch, especially that San Francisco LA series where Cody Bellinger just has such a shitty season, and for him to come through and really carry the offense in a way, him and Chris Taylor, is just what baseball is all about, man. Like a guy only in baseball can you hit 150. Like Eli said on the stream, he and Sandy Leon had very comparable offensive numbers, which, oh my goodness. And for him to come back and just have a game-winning hit in Game 5 of the NLDS and hit that game-tying home run when you're on the brink of being down 3-0, it's just awesome, man. Nothing's better than playoff baseball. I'm against Eli. I don't want Braves fans to be in the World Series. Screw that. I would love to see the Dodgers really just devastate Braves fans to an extraneous amount. But yeah, I personally think it'll be Dodgers coming out of this one. And I predicted Dodgers-Red Sox, so that's why I'm rooting for the Red Sox there. But it looks like the Astros, even with McCullers out, that just shows how good the Astros are. And I think they have a bit of a chip on their shoulder saying, you know what, yeah, we cheated, but we can also win without cheating. So we'll see how it goes tonight is game 6 with, I'm not sure who's pitching, but it's a big one tonight.
I'm on the side of Eli here where I do want to see the Braves, but lose just because I want to see new blood. The Dodgers are pretty much like the Warriors of the NBA at the time, and Red Sox, it would be nice to see them. I really don't like the Houston team. I don't like Altuve that much. Carlos Correa's turned himself into the villain of the MLB. Let's be honest here. I do like Correa myself, but the only reason why I would like to see that team make the World Series would be Dusty Baker deserves it, to be honest. Dusty Baker has been in the MLB for so long, working hard, deserves it on that end. But I do want to see Boston make it. I mean, a team that has surprised everyone. Let's be honest. We all expected Boston to be the lower ends of the AL East, where with the Yankees, the Blue Jays had gotten better. We expected them to be probably fourth place, where the Marlins were, but it hasn't been like that. Let's just go to the mailbag, which we have right now, because at this point I'm just losing my shit here.
Yeah, let me grab this one from Alan Witz. Hold on just a moment.
You're gonna have a lot of editing there to do, Eli.
Looking forward to 2022. Let's zoom in on this one. Alan asks, would any of the current roster be a starter in any of the season's postseason teams? He wants us to pick players, current Marlins, that are starting caliber players on the postseason teams.
I'll take this one if you want, Kevin.
Go for it. And you can't say Sandy and Pablo. That's what the question says.
What a strange question, because obviously if, Trevor Rogers is a given, I think he's on any single playoff roster, and he's probably pitching game 1 or 2. And then if Sixto is healthy, he was on a postseason roster last year, and you definitely have Sixto on there. And then you can even go further down. I know Edward Cabrera didn't pitch lights out in his first cup of coffee, but just him and his stuff would play extremely well out of the bullpen or even in a starter role with all these pitchers going out and Max Scherzer having to close out a game and Nathan Eovaldi having to try and pitch the ninth inning. Edward Cabrera, I think let's say 6 of the Marlins top guys, Sandy, Pablo, Edward, Sixto, Trevor, and even Luzardo, all 6 of them would have some sort of role on a playoff roster because of the stuff alone. And yeah, whether it's out of the bullpen or in a starter role, they would all be valuable to any postseason roster. So I found that question interesting. That's why I wanted to take it.
I'm going to let Peter go next here for this one.
Yeah, good question. It's a good question. Not if you think about it from a pitching side. If you flip it and think about the hitters, which I think maybe is kind of where Alan was leading with this one. Basically, right. When any of the Marlins hitters make any of these rosters or start for anyone, I think that's the kind of point he's making is, would you plug and play? And the problem is, obviously, we traded away a load of, obviously, Duvall's there. He's on a roster. So, yeah, he absolutely would have made it. I guess, who is the Marlins' best offensive player right now? I mean, listen, I'd have Miggy on any roster, but I'm not sure he's starting.
You could put Isan on any of those 2 outs there.
Jazz and Aguilar would probably be on the roster.
Obviously, Isan, Sandy Leon, those kinds of Alfaro, especially, I think would make the roster, guys. Come on.
Well, I think you're saying, are they starters though? This is the question. Would you have any of these dudes starting in any of the teams?
Yes, I have one. I think Jazz would definitely be the starting second baseman on the Red Sox right now. Do you know who the Red Sox are? Without cheating, do you know who the Red Sox are playing? Yeah, Arroyo. Christian Arroyo right now. Christian, a young journeyman, because he's never really had much major league success in the first place. He's playing second base every day. He's a number 9 hitter. They're not expecting anything from him offensively. And I think Jazz is clearly an upgrade over Arroyo. He is more
plug him in. Yeah, plug him in. Jazz Chisholm. Boom.
More home run power, more speed, and maybe a tick less uncertain defensively, but overall as a player, that offense, if you had Jazz instead of Arroyo, is probably the weakest link in the entire lineup and at the plate. So if you put Jazz in there, I think that would make the difference in the series. Maybe he flips one game in this series to give Red Sox the commanding lead instead of facing elimination as they currently are.
Would you guys put Dylan Flora on any of these rosters? I mean, the guy was in the World Series last year with the Dodgers, so I think that's more of an underrated name. Obviously, you could put Aggie in any of these rosters. You could put Jazz. Trevor very much deserves to be on a roster.
Yeah,
Pablo would be on all of these.
I'm with Peter. I think the intent of the question was more about, are any of the hitters on the Marlins good enough to plug into these teams? And yes, at least in my first impression, I'd say Jazz as the Red Sox second baseman. That's probably the only little one that I'm confident in. You can make the case for some other ones here, but overall,
you could maybe take Aguilar playing for the Dodgers now that Muncie's gone down. Do you know what I mean? You could plug him in, and then you've got Bellinger back out in the outfield. But let's say Muncie was healthy, you're still taking Muncie over Aguilar probably. So, yeah, Jazz to the Red Sox it is.
Yep. Let's get on to the next one. 2022 starting line. Oh, okay.
Yeah, we can stay with him because he doubled up on questions.
Yeah,
2022 starting lineup.
I'm gonna let Isaac go first if you want.
I mean, it's
too early, but I mean,
it's almost an impossible question, because we assume there's at least gonna be 4 spots different from 2021. We just don't know who's gonna fill up. So I'll go position by position really quick. Lewin or Aguilar at first in DH. Second base can be Jazz. Shortstop's gonna be Rojas. Third base, barring any moves, will be BA. And then the outfield is where it gets interesting. You could pretty much pencil in Jesus Sanchez in right. And other than that, it is straight. It's no one. It's going to be Peter in center, Eli in left, and me behind the dish because right now they got nothing. So those are the names I mentioned are the only surefire starters for next year. And some of them aren't even surefire. If they sign a third baseman, Brian Anderson, who knows? And same with Miguel Rojas. So it's an interesting question for sure.
Yep. Eli, if you want to take this one now.
Well, it was only a few weeks ago that I was rather confident in the Marlins eventually arranging a deal for Wilson Contreras. I mean, the more that I think about it, the more skeptical I am about that, knowing how extremely likely it is that he'd want to test free agency next winter, and that the Marlins, if they don't have that extension in place with him, it'd make it hard to justify trading for him now. But I mean, for the time being, I still hold out hope that he slots into that lineup somewhere with Miggy presumably opening as their shortstop. You got Jazz at second. I think Jazz at second and Miggy at short, and Wilson Contreras behind the plate. Brian Anderson will be in the organization, but I feel like I wouldn't be surprised at all if BA starts the year on the injured list and they acquire a veteran of some kind to plug in there on the infield in free agency to give them some depth. Somebody like Eduardo Escobar that I know Peter is fond of from his Diamondbacks dancing and all that. He's going to be a free agent, and that's one guy that makes some sense to me on a number of levels that they could actually afford and that they'd be willing to plug in there. So I'd say on that opening day lineup, you get Escobar in there batting 5th or 6th. We feel pretty confident about Jesus Sanchez being in right. And I think it's hard to be satisfied with his offseason if De La Cruz is automatically in there at the start of the year, that hopefully there are 2 outfielders of some kind that have longer track records than he does that they managed to acquire via trade and free agency. And I think you're going to get a combination of 2 new outfielders in that lineup that aren't already with the organization. What direction they go with that, I don't know. And I mean, it continues to be one of the most fascinating things about this Marlins offseason is what they do at first base between Lewin and Aguilar and Cooper. I just don't see a scenario where all 3 of them are back with the organization when there's just so much redundancy. It's hard to put together a cohesive roster with all 3 of those guys being primarily first basemen, but it'll make it easier if we had the DH. So I lean towards Aguilar being the opening day DH, Lewin being at first base, and Garrett Cooper having a new home somewhere where he can thrive and hit homers, health permitting, but probably not with the Marlins, just due to where the organization is right now.
I saw Peter's reaction there when Eli said Cooper at a new home, but we'll let you take this one here. What's your 2022 starting line? Because I do think I saw a question about first base in the mailbag.
All right. So a catcher, Jacob Stallings is there. First base is Lewin Diaz. Second base, Jazz Chisholm. Shortstop, Miguel Rojas. Third base, Jose Ramirez. You then have, who have we got? Center field, Brian Reynolds. You've got Kyle Schwarber, DH. You've got Jesus in right field, and then you've got Castellanos playing in the outfield as well. There you go. That's your opening day, and Sandy on the mound. Listen, give me 90 wins all day long with that team.
Peter, where's Juan Soto?
Soto's on his way next year. That's the deadline. Actually, that's deadline for that one. Actually, I'm intrigued to see what the Nats do on that front because they are getting no discount from Soto for an extension. Absolutely none. And I'm intrigued to see where they end up as an organization and whether they do look for a full rebuild extravaganza with him. But I'm not sure. They'll think they'll just have to pay up. Anyway, that's my opening day lineup. Positive.
Yeah. I'll just say mine quickly. Catcher, I'm going to go Wilson Contreras. First base, Lewin. DH, Aggie. Second, Jazz. Shortstop, Miggy. Third, I'm going to go Brian Anderson. Right field, Jesus. Center, Brian Reynolds. And at left, that one's probably the hardest one. For now, I can't really give you a definite answer. But if I really have to choose, let's just go DLC for now, De La Cruz. I don't think he'll crack the starting lineup because they'll obviously get someone better. Castellanos is an option, but I think right for now, DLC.
I like Peters better, bro.
Yeah, I think we might all like Peters better at this point. I mean, that would be the dream off season. I think we would all of the Marlins for the rest of our lives if they did that for sure.
If I'm honest though, it's there. The Marlins could do that. They could make that happen. Like Ramirez only got 2 years on his deal. The Guardians are in a different spot at the moment. They're retooling, so they can do something. Stallings, he's okay. He's a defensive catcher. Like he is not an offensive dude. Reynolds is obviously the gem there, and then you've just got to pay 2 dudes, Castellanos and Schwarber. Like it's there. The Marlins could do that quite easily if they really wanted to, in my opinion.
I love that idea, Schwarber. I've always had it in my mind, but with all these players that we're saying at this point, we would be going crazy just to name anyone at this point because
anyone, pay anyone.
Yeah.
Hashtag pay anyone.
Yeah.
Get it going.
Let's get it going. Well, we already talked about we talked a little bit about the Miggy extension, but if we want to get into that, thoughts on Chris Taylor and free agency, and what's on Leywood, Coop, Aggie, which we'll get into that right now. Let's start here with Eli. What are your thoughts on? I guess we'll triple on these questions here.
Yeah, well, Chris Taylor is one of my guys. I really do love the potential fit with the team, and I mean, that's kind of linked to the uncertainty with John Birdie, who I was pretty high on too, but he's coming off this scary concussion, and he seems like just a hard guy to bank on being available, and they do have minor league options for him that it's sort of related to the Miggy Rowe conversation where you like a lot of the things he does, but ultimately the lack of power impact is still something they need to address somehow. And Chris Taylor is that rare utility guy that has impactful power, and we've seen it literally the day before we're recording this. That was when he had his 3 home run game to single-handedly ensure that the Dodgers stayed alive and avoided elimination. How many current Marlins players have even the potential to hit 3 home runs in a single game? And it's
Brian
just
Anderson did.
Yeah, right. He did just barely a year ago. And but up the middle, in terms of guys that could play up the middle, either on an everyday basis or even on a part-time basis, it's a rare skill set that Chris Taylor has. The concerns is that he'll be tagged with the qualifying offer, and the Marlins will have to give up some of their future draft capital just to, and that's before even worrying about actually paying him, which I would think he's going to be in line for an easy 4-year deal that would make him certainly higher paid than anybody on this current Marlins team. It's not the type of contract that they've given out before. He's not he's not a necessity. There are, as I've discussed, this big universe of players that they could acquire, and a lot of them via trade that are not quite the same guy as Taylor, but some are actually better in other ways, or there are many ways to put together this puzzle. But Taylor's versatility, the fact that he does play 6 different positions and at least 4 of them on like an above average defensive level to go along with the power that he has, the speed that he has, and his being in the prime of his career, I would make him a very big priority for them this offseason. And I've given my thoughts on first base with Lewin, Cooper, and Aguilar. I think ultimately they'll have to trade one. And with Lewin, just all the years of team control that he has and the low salary that he has, he is pretty protected right now. They went through a lot of trouble to acquire him, and they want to give him an opportunity to play and actually find out what he can do at the major league level, at least for one more year. So it'll be a decision between Cooper and Aguilar, and we'll have a lot of time to really break that down leading up to the tender deadline. Their contracts coming up. We have almost like 6 more weeks until those guys have to officially be tendered contracts by the Marlins. So there'll be a lot of time to look at the pros and cons between Cooper and Aguilar and which one of them makes most sense for the team moving forward. But they'll have to choose, I think.
Yeah, let's go with Peter here on the questions.
I don't often disagree with Eli for obvious reasons, but I'm going to have to disagree with him on both of his answers here. I know. Oh, my day. Cut the feed. Cut the feed now. Get this UK dude off this feed. I'm not in on Chris Taylor, to be honest. The versatility, okay, yeah, but the versatility requirement kind of goes away a bit with this, if the DH is there. And so you kind of end up paying for versatility that maybe you do, maybe you don't need. And it ends up being a 4-year, $100 and something million deal or whatever. I don't know. I just think the production will be underwhelming, perhaps, for the money. The versatility is there, though. But for me, I'm out on Chris Taylor. First base, I'm keeping all 3 dudes. All 3 of these guys. There's no reason to move these guys. Like, if we remember back to last year, everyone was down at the same time and we had no depth. If Cooper is coming off the bench, great. No problem with that. Coop's a hitter. The problem was there was too much Joe Panic, too much Isan, too much Mags, too much Sandy Leone at the bullpen. Like, if Cooper's a backup guy, no problem with that. If Miggy's a backup guy, no problem with that. That's a good thing. The Marlins will be well positioned if that's the case. So for me, I'm keeping all 3. No on Chris Taylor. Bigger aspirations.
Yep, let's go with Isaac now.
I did agree with most of what Eli said about Chris Taylor. I think he'd be a hell of an upgrade anywhere on the field for the Marlins. And I thought his offensive numbers were underwhelming for the most part. I'm looking at it here. He's had an OPS plus over 100 since 2017. So he's been a consistently above average offensive player. Now, are there better options? 100%. So if you're going to give someone that big 3 to 4 year contract that's going to be north of $70 million, I think you choose a different player. That's just my opinion. And I would love to keep Coop. Regarding first base, I'd love to keep Coop because I think he might be the best hitter of all three of them. And I know that it's going to be tough to keep all three, but you just go into spring training with all three of them. Things usually work themselves out. One of them's going to get hurt, or one of them's going to not perform well, and you're going to wish you had that guy that you traded. So I agree with Peter on that one. I would go into spring with all three of them because realistically, how much could you receive for Cooper? I think he's probably more valuable to the Marlins than he is to another team. So especially with the DH. So I would keep all three of them because this is an offensive starving team, and all three of those guys are offense oriented. Maybe besides Lewin, even though he's like just a great defender. So I would just play safe and go into camp with all three. And then if you're in like July and Aguilar and Lewin are playing fantastic and you can trade Cooper, then you do it. But I would go into next season with all three.
Yeah, I mean, I think Coop is the odd man out, and I think a team like the Royals could really use him in the AL. I know we talked about this in the group chat a long time ago, but I think Stalmont was the guy Eli mentioned that could be a good. I guess you could make a deal there with Coop and get Stalmont or something, but maybe go in the spring training, and whoever doesn't win the job, you either trade him or DFA, I guess. But Coop does hold some value to an American League team, especially with what we saw in 2020, which was a shortened year, but we still saw what Coop could do at the DH, and I think really just keeping him there would make the most sense, and especially we saw how much it affected Coop when we lost the DH in this year, 2021. So, and then you have Aggie. Aggie's won team MVP, I think 2 years in a row, if I'm correct. He won it in 2020 and 2021. So, and Lewin's an up-and-coming guy who really has earned himself the role there to start at first base opening day. Chris Taylor, I'll take it. Like, he's a really good player. He could pretty much play all the positions except catcher, if I'm correct, and pitcher. So it makes a lot of sense. We already talked about Miggy, so we won't really get into that. So I think we could get into the next question.
Yeah, just one more on here about the closer situation and what the Marlins should invest in that from ASU family fan, and whether it's worth going after a big money guy like Kimbrel, he's going to be a trade candidate because the White Sox still have control over him. Iglesias, Raisel Iglesias is obviously the name that's front and center because he's going to be a free agent for the first time, coming off maybe his best year with the Angels. And for either guy, you're talking about a pretty big financial commitment that they have not made to any pitcher, period. So like since this rebuild started, they've believed internally in their ability to develop arms, and in most cases they've been proven correct. But whether it makes sense to get one of these guys as like the exclamation point, the finishing touch on an elite pitching staff.
Yeah. If you want to start here with this one, Pete.
This is a real tough one. This really is, because I think kind of Eli set us up there with the elite dudes that are free agents are going to be very expensive, and we've seen that last year. And then you get them, some of them getting signed to 10+ million deals, and some of them don't even make it out of spring training. This is so volatile a position. I'd be shocked if the Marlins went absolutely balls deep on someone really expensive. It's just not in our MO right now. It really isn't. But for me, it's we need someone reliable back there. We really do. Like, the whole Bass extravaganza just was so painful last year. Bass is still going to be on the roster, I think. I mean, he's obviously got money owed, so you assume he's going to be there. But I'm happy for him to be in a non-leverage spot. I think that's all for what I'm looking for Bass. Do we go and get someone? Who's the guy who's with the Dodgers that was with the Brewers? That I can't think of his name now. Ex-Brewers, was closer for the Brewers. Knable, yeah, I think he's a free agent.
Yeah, we talked about him on a recent pod as one guy they could go after. Yeah. He's had an unusual postseason starting games for them. Started 2 games, I think, during this run. So he'll be a free agent. I also mentioned on Twitter just yesterday, Joe Kelly, who seems to be going into the offseason with an injury. He hurt his arm pitching on Thursday.
Discount.
Yeah, so he's coming off a decent-sized 3-year deal, but I think the price would be lower this time given his age coming off the injury. But his performance in terms of the things you can control as a pitcher, keeping the ball in the ballpark and above average in terms of strikeouts, like he is surprisingly consistent year after year after year. He's got a fun personality, and I imagine it'll be like a 2-year deal for him. Something more than what they paid Bass, certainly, this past offseason. But because he does a better job at those fundamentals, that I like his potential as like really solid setup guy that they didn't necessarily have throughout this season.
Yeah, I mean, Kimbrel, I mentioned him in an article a while ago as an option. It was more of an unrealistic thing, but when Mish came on, I know he said he really liked Kimbrel. He wanted him on there. Iglesias, if I'm correct, he said, put $10 million down and I'll play for the Marlins. Something like that was the quote. I'm not going to quote the guy, but if it's like a 1-year, $10 million, maybe do it. I mean, you gave Corey Dickerson, 2 years, $12 million, I think it was.
Oh, it was more than that. It was 2 years, 17.5 for Corey Dickerson back then.
Yeah, so maybe it makes sense to get a shutdown guy like Iglesias, who had a really good year with the Angels. So, yeah, I think we're gonna end it here, guys. Pete, thanks for coming on. Eli, thank you for coming on. It was an absolute honor. So,
thank you guys. Thanks so much. And listen, the pod is absolutely exceptional. Love it. Wish you the best with this. And anytime you need me, you know where I am.
Yep, Isaac. Obviously, you're always here with us. Thank you, man, for being on here as always. Remember to subscribe to the YouTube. Follow us on all the podcast websites. Eli would know more where those are. And
go to fishstripes.com.
That too. As Paul Severino says. All our coverage on Fish Stripes.
Stay tuned for Wednesday because that's going to be a good Fish Stripes live. So I think we'll end it there. Once again, from Pete, Eli, Isaac, and myself, Kevin. Peace out, guys, and we'll see you guys all in 2 weeks.
That's a wrap, everybody.